Today's shiur begins at the Mishnah that you will find in the middle of the Omid. If you like, you can count 18 lines up from the bottom, or if you prefer, 9 lines before the Gemara lines get wide. The Mishnah will focus on what we referred to in one of our previous shurim as Matnas Beis Choron, the gift of Beis Choron. Beis Choron is the name of a place, and now the Mishnah. Hamuder hano mechavero v'ein lo ma yochal. If a person is prohibited from benefiting from his friend, and he has no food, nosno li'acher l'shumatona v'halo muter ba. So if we use our common example of A prohibited B from benefiting from him, and Mr. B has no food, Mr. A is concerned. So what does he do? He gives food to someone else as a gift, and Mr. B then is entitled to take from that food that was given to the outsider by Mr. A. So of course Mr. A cannot give the food directly to Mr. B. That would be a violation of the vow. But the Tanna Kama says Mr. A can give the food to someone else, and Mr. B can benefit from the food, from the gift given to that outsider. Maisa be'echad, the Beis Choron. There was a story, an incident with someone in the town of Beis Choron. Shehoya oviv mudar heimenu hano. The father of our subject was prohibited from benefiting from his son. Vayamasi es beno, and the grandson was going to be married off. The Omar lechavero, and the father of the groom says to a friend. Now, bear in mind, we're dealing with 3 generations here, and the grandfather cannot benefit right now from his son's holdings, from his son's properties, and in this case, from the meal that the son is going to be making for the grandson's wedding. That's a very uncomfortable situation. So, what is the solution? So the father of the groom says to a friend of his, an outsider, Chotzer useudo nesunim b'matana v'einon lefonecha ela kedei sheyavoi abo v'yoichal imonu b'seuda. Now, from the way we're reading the Mishnah and the way some of the Meforshim take it, this was all stated explicitly. I am giving you the hall, like the wedding hall. The chutzner is the courtyard where the wedding meal is going to take place. I'm giving you the courtyard and the meal to you as a gift. And the only reason you're going to be receiving this as a gift from me is so that my father can come and partake of the wedding feast. Omar, the friend, then said, Im sheli heim, if they're mine, as you say, then I am dedicating them, I am sanctifying them to heaven. Meaning I'm dedicating the chotzer and the meal to the Beis Hamikdash. That which is mukdash l'shamayim, that which is sanctified or dedicated, is something that no one will be able to benefit from. That no one will be able to derive personal benefit from. Omar le, so the father of the groom heard this, and he says, Lo nosati loch es sheli shetagdisham l'shamayim. I didn't give you my things in order for you to sanctify them. Omar loi, so the friend says, Lo nosata li es shelcha ela sheteato v'avicha oichlim v'shoisin u'misratzin zeh lo zeh. Your whole intention for me to get this was so that you and your father can sit down at the feast, eat and drink, and come to good terms with one another. And the sin of a vow violation should then be upon me. In other words, by my facilitating this get-together, I'm in effect facilitating the violation of a vow. When this story came to the attention of the rabbis, they said, Kol matana she'ena shemigdisha tei mekudeshes eino matana. Any gift that the potential for sanctifying it doesn't exist, it's not a gift. The Rashi says, Omru chacham kol matana she'ena kol kach birshusa makabel. If it's not so much in the domain of the receiver of the gift, shemigdisha eino mekudeshes eino matana, that if he were to try to sanctify it, it wouldn't become sanctified, so then it's not a gift. The Gemara asks what many might say is the obvious question. Maisa listar, is this Mishnah presenting an incident to contradict the opening law? Basically, when Mishnayos teach a law and the law is followed by an incident, the incident is there to illustrate the law, to support the law. In this case, we saw the opening law of the Mishnah, that when you have mudur hano mechavero, and he can't eat, he has nothing to eat, so you give it to someone as a gift, and that makes things allowed. Well, here you've got the father can't partake of the meal, the son gives the meal as a gift, and we say that it doesn't work. So that's what we call here in the Gemara, Maisa Listora, Maisa, to contradict the opening teaching of the Mishnah. The Gemara responds, Chisure mechasra v'hachi kotani. The Mishnah, as is the case in many Mishnayos, was left deliberately abbreviated, and there are missing words by way of understanding. We're not saying missing text, but as far as the understanding is concerned, more information has to be filled in, and thusly one is to understand the Mishnah. It is true that a solution for someone that doesn't have what to eat is the madir, giving the food to someone else as a gift. However, if the end result shows that the original gift was given only as a means of getting around a vow, and that's the only reason the gift was given, then the gift is not a gift. Then it's forbidden. And in fact, an incident took place in Beis Choron where the end demonstrated that the beginning, the original gift, was only as a way of getting around the vow. Let us look at the Ran commentary. You'll notice the Ran on the 5th line under the Gemara text. That the end of his statement sheds light on the beginning, namely the beginning was, I'm giving this meal to you as a gift. However, what does he say at the end? Einon elo haroma. It's all a subterfuge. He continued and he ended off his gift by saying, they are given to you only insofar as enabling my father to come and partake of the meal. As long as that wasn't spelled out, even though the circumstances would appear to be a means of circumventing the restriction and enabling the mudar to benefit, it's okay, it's a gift, and it works as the opening of the Mishnah had taught. This is going to be further emphasized as we go on in the Gemara. We have diamonds that appear on the side under the nosei mivneh heading. The diamond represents shtei lishonos berava, two versions of rava. Be'ezen nusach amrinon de matnas beis choron oser. What version of statement, of vowing, or I should say of gift giving, will create the prohibition. The Gemara. Omar Rava. Loi shanu elo di Omar lei. Lo shanu means the Mishnah that taught that the matnas beis choron was ineffective is if he said v'einon lefanecha elo kidei sheyavoy abo. I'm giving you this gift, the courtyard and the meal, and it's only in order for my father to be able to come and participate. As the Ran says, that's a T'nai Gomor. That's an absolute condition. In other words, you have a gift given with stipulations. Aval Amar Lei, if the son had said to his friend that's going to receive the gift, I'm giving you this meal as a gift. Sheyehu lefanecha, they should be yours. Sheyavoy Abba, that dad should be able to come. Midaitchahu di Amar Lei, what is really happening is I'm giving you this as a gift, and if you, the receiver of the gift, want my father to come, so good, he'll be able to come. But it's your decision. It's with your approval that father would be coming. Then it's okay. So even though these two versions, they sound the same, but as many of you are probably well aware, when it comes to legal matters, the precise phrasing makes all the difference. So that if the gift was given with a formal language of stipulation, of condition, then it's a mere subterfuge and it will not be effective. The giving of the gift will not enable the father to partake. However, if it's stated this way, then it's okay. Lishno achrino amri law. And now another version of Rava is Omar Rava lo tema. Don't say taima di Omar le einon lefanecha hu d'aser. Abel Omar le hein lefanecha sheyavo abel v'yochal muter. In other words, don't make the distinction like we did in the first version. Elo afilu Omar le hein lefanecha yavo abel v'yochal ozer. Even if he said, I'm giving you this meal, let the meal be in your possession, and father shall then be able to come and eat, that's forbidden. My taima, why is that not acceptable? Answer, seudasoi moichachas alav. Literally, the meal proves what's happening. What do we mean by that? So we look in the Ran, on the fourth line from the end, even using that expression is not going to be effective in allowing the father to come. True, in general, phrasing the deal as that v'yavo abba, that is not a t'nai. That doesn't represent a condition, a stipulation in the gift. Nevertheless, hochashayni, here we're not going to be so lenient, mishum danan sadi, because we bear witness. Shein odom meichin sudal l'nisui b'no v'nois l'achar. A person doesn't prepare an entire wedding feast for his son and then give the feast over to someone else as a gift. Hilkoch sudasam u'chachasalov. The fact that you have this meal and these circumstances, it just goes to show that which he said to his friend, the Yavo Abba, and dad will then be able to come. Really, l'tanai gomer komer. He really stated that as a formal stipulation, and that means then that the whole gift is contingent on the father coming. And the father coming is in fact a violation of the original vow. The Gemara continues now at the top of Omid Beis. Hahu Gavra de Havale Bra Davishomit Kifi de Kisna. Was a man that had a son that used to steal stalks of flax. Asrinu The father was very upset with his son's behavior, and father prohibited the son from benefiting from his property. Omrule, they asked the father, Vi havoi bar broch tzub rabonamai, and if your grandson turns out to be a Talmud Chacham, so what's going to be then? In other words, a man has properties, he amassed wealth. He would only be too happy that his grandson, who was a Torah scholar, should benefit from this. But yet the father here had prohibited his son from benefiting from the property. So how is it ever going to get to the grandson? Omar lahon. So the father says, Likni hodain. All right, says, let my son acquire the properties. V'avoy bar breit sumrabona liknei. And if the grandson turns out to be a Talmud Chacham, so then let him acquire it. So the question is, what does that work? Is that an effective arrangement? The Rashi points out on the third line from the top, Likni Hodain, the Ihave Bar Breitz Rabbanan. There's a slight girsa change that you see in the Rashi that we have in the Gemara, and he says Dei instead of Vi, the Vav, Rashi has as a Dalet, and that makes a difference. What do we mean? That it's a gift a transfer that's conditional. And Rashi says, Mishum da'akati lo havi bar brei ba'olam. The grandson hasn't even been born yet. V'havi le mezake ubar. What you are doing here is you're transferring something to a fetus, that which is as yet unborn. V'mezake ubar lo kana. And when you transfer something to an ubar, he doesn't acquire. Rashi, of course, is adding quite a bit that we don't see in our Gemara text. In the Rosh commentary, you can see the case spelled out very clearly. Omar lahon likni hodain v'chulei almenas sheyikne livno I have tzur b'rabbanan. So the father says, well then, let the wayward son acquire it, that if his son turns out to be a Talmud Chacham, a Torah scholar, so then he will acquire it. The Gemara continues with trying to answer what's the story here. And on the side of the under the Nosei, the topic heading Kini Almanas Lahaknos, the triangle represents Ma'akav, an attempt to keep track of let's say alternating opinions. The inverted triangle, De'ah, the low mo'il. This triangle is misamein gam amakshim alman de savar de moil. We're going to use the triangle to highlight the opinion that this kind of deal does not work, and also to highlight those that question those who say that it does work. The triangle with the point facing upwards, they are the mo'il. An opinion that it does work, Davidumya de Sudar, because this arrangement, this kind of deal, is like the case of the Kinyan Sudar, the Kinyan involving a handkerchief, which is very commonly used if you have Mr. A wants to acquire something from Mr. B, so Mr. A will take out a handkerchief and give it to Mr. B, and in exchange for that, Mr. B's item is transferred in ownership to Mr. A. That's a Kinyan Sudar. Now, as we go through the Gemara, we'll have to see what's the connection, what's the parallel to this. So now our Gemara continues. Amri Pumpa Disoi. They're the number one. They are the first opinion. Kni almanas lahaknos hu v'chol kni almanas lahaknos lo koni. What we've described here is you are to acquire in order for someone else to receive. That's kni, acquire, almanas lahaknos, with the condition that someone else will get it. that is considered ineffective. Rav Nachman Omar Koni. Rav Nachman says it is effective. Kni almanas lahaknos essentially means that the person who is initially receiving it is receiving it only for the purpose of the item being transferred to a third party, to someone down the line. So that in our case, the wayward son isn't really becoming the owner of the property. He's becoming an owner of it only with respect to his being only as a result of he being a conduit through whom the grandson would receive it. So Pupadisoi says that is not considered a transaction. In order for a transaction to work, even a stipulated transaction, the receiver has to become a full-fledged owner of it, which is not the case over here. Rav Nachman says it does work. And he explains the sudra, the case of the handkerchief, Kni almanas lahaknos hu. Practically speaking, Mr. A wants to acquire something from Mr. B. So Mr. A takes out a handkerchief, he gives it to Mr. B only in order to cause the transaction to take place. And immediately after Mr. B takes the handkerchief, he gives it right back to Mr. A. So the whole receipt of the handkerchief, the sudra, was only for the purpose of creating the transfer of B's item to Mr. A, and immediately after that, the handkerchief gets transferred back. So you see, Kni almanas lahaknos, take the handkerchief only for the purpose of transferring the other item to Mr. A, and it works. We take a look at the Ran. You'll notice on the second line under the Gemara text, the hos sudra kni almanas lahaknosu, the chiyoyev koine sudre lamakne. When Mr. A, who is kohen, is trying to acquire something from Mr. B, and so Mr. A gives the handkerchief or the cloth, the sudr, the cloth, to the makne, to Mr. B. Eino mizakeu bo l'shum davar el she'elo bo kinyan b'chtei sheyikne lo or sheyakne lo karka shelo. Mr. B's taking of the handkerchief from Mr. A is only in order for the transfer of Mr. B's property to A to take place. And nevertheless, we still consider it a transaction. Through that sudar, Mr. A acquires the field. Alma kinyan ki hai kona. You see, therefore, that a transaction of that nature is effective. The Gemara continues, and notice the inverted triangle. This is an attack on what Rav Nachman just said. And we're also describing this as part of a long question, and there are two parts. You've got Rav Ashi, and later Rava. You can see we've used a double underline to highlight their names. These are two, we'll say, attacks on Rav Nachman's explanation. Omar Rav Ashi. Uman le molon de sudra itofis le lo mitfis. Who is to say that in the case of the handkerchief that A gave to B, if Mr. B insists on keeping it, holding it, that he in fact would be able to keep hold of it? In other words, it's not a catalyst for effecting a transfer, but it's a real transfer. A gives to Mr. B a handkerchief, and in exchange for receiving the handkerchief, B gives the piece of property to Mr. A. So that's a real transfer. That's not Kni almanas lahaknos. And therefore, if Rav Nachman is going to base his idea that Kni almanas lahaknos is effective based on the sudar, they're not parallel. And a further distinction, v'oid sudra Kni almanas lahaknos v'koni min hashta. The sudar transfer, the sudar exchange, creates a transaction that takes place immediately. Takes place from right now. The property referred to above with the father and a wayward son and a grandson that might be a Talmud Chacham and eventually get the property. That's le'emosai koni. When is the deal to take place? We're saying the father and is transferred to the son in anticipation of the grandson becoming a Talmud Chacham. When does the deal take place? When is it clinched? When the grandson becomes a Talmud Chacham. But when that takes place, it's as if the handkerchief has already been returned to the original owner. Let us go over the Ran's explanation. Let's look at it together on the 7th line under the Gemara text. Klomar, when you want to describe, as Rav Nachman did, that the Sudar type exchange is like Kni Almanas Lahaknos, a transaction with a very specific intent that it should be transferred to a third party or to another party. Miu Ika Bei Chalam Yusa. In the case of a Kinyan Sudar, it has a certain strength or advantage. Davikoni Kni Almanas Lahaknos Min Hashta. The transaction takes place immediately. I'm giving you the Sudar for the property that you own to be given to me from right now. Mekami demadu sudra makne lakoina. Before Mr. B returns the handkerchief to Mr. A. So that when Mr. B draws the handkerchief, immediately Mr. B's property is transferred before B ever returns the handkerchief to Mr. A. The stam kinyan me'achshavu, a simple, an unqualified transaction is understood to be from right now. Avol hacha, but in the case of the grandson that might be a Talmud Chacham story, the properties of the grandfather, when would they be acquired? Only when the grandson turns out to be a Torah scholar. It's pretty understandable that since the whole transaction to the son was only for the grandson to get it, the grandfather's intention was not for the son to acquire them until that moment that the grandson turns out to be a Talmud Chacham. What's he going to do with it in the meantime? And as the Gemara said, and at that moment, at that point in time, that later point in time, the Sudar, so to speak, has already been returned. Klomar. Klomar means, we're not translating this, but there's an analogy here. Klomar, what does this mean? What do we mean to say? Kolsa means end, finished. Kolsa la oisa hakno. That transaction has already finished. Bein shikneu bekinyan, bein shikneu bechazaka. Whether the transfer was with a sudar or whether it was done through chazaka, meaning let us say that the grandfather gave to his son, we said the properties in order for the grandson to eventually get it. So imagine he did that transfer with a handkerchief. So the grandfather gave to his own son, or let's say the son gave a handkerchief to his father in exchange for the property, but that property doesn't get transferred immediately. It's only going to get transferred maybe years later when the grandson turns out to be a Talmud Chacham. And the handkerchief that might have been used, that the son gave to his father, the father would have returned the handkerchief already at that point, at that early point in time. And as the Gemara says, the kinyan, the means of transaction, has finished a long time before the actual transaction takes place. Hence, it's very different than the case of a standard Kinyan Sudar, when Mr. A gives the handkerchief to Mr. B. Mr. B is still holding on to the handkerchief while the transfer of the property is taking place, so that the means of making the kinyan is still intact, is still extant, while the transaction is taking place, making the cases very different. And hence Rav Ashi's objection to Rav Nachman's justification of Kni Almanas Lahaknas based on Sudar. Let's continue. Amar le Rava le Rav Nachman. V'ha matnas beis choron. Is it not so that the case of matnas beis choron, the Kni Almanas Lahaknasu, v'lo koni, in the case of matnas beis choron, remember the son who had prohibited his father from benefiting. What did the son do upon making the wedding for his son? The grandson's getting married. So the father of the groom, he gave the property to so-and-so, to the outsider, almanas, with the condition that the grandfather should be able to come. So it's kini, you acquire, almanas lactos, in order for grandfather to come and participate. And the Mishnah said it doesn't work. So, do you not see from the case of Matnas Beis Choron a challenge to Rav Nachman? Now, you can see the triangle is going to appear with the point facing up. Rav Nachman's, we defend Rav Nachman in the face of this question. Zimnin, Omar Lei, sometimes, according to some versions, or sometimes Rav Nachman would say, as far as Rava's question, Mishum de Sudasa Mochachasalav, the case of Matnas Beis Choron isn't a real kinyan. It's a subterfuge, and as we explained before, people don't give away wedding meals, and it was only a subterfuge and not with any matona intention whatsoever. That's why Matnas Beis Choron doesn't work. V'zimnin Omar Le, and on other occasions Rav Nachman would say to Rava, Rabbi Eliezer he Diomar Afilu Vitur Ozer b'mudar hana. If we look in the Ran toward the bottom of the page, V'zimnin Omar Le Rabbi Eliezer he Diomar Afilu Vitur Ozer b'mudar hana Lav d'shayach hachadin Vitur ela d'ledimyon ba'alma nakte. Not that we're dealing here with an actual case of vitur, but it's an analogy. Where you find Rabbi Eliezer is more restrictive, more stringent with regard to the rules of vows than the rules of standard monetary law. In terms of general monetary law, the walking on someone's property does not constitute theft. And when someone prohibits someone else from benefiting from one's property, the mere walking on the property constitutes a violation of the vow, according to Rebbe Lezer. So too over here, with regard to laws of a monetary nature, Kni almanas lahaknos is effective. Mishum chumra dinedorim amrinon delo koni. However, when there is an issue of a vow involved, like in the case of the Matnas Beis Choron, there Kni almanas lahaknos will not work. So that's the second answer that Rav Nachman would on occasion give, that the Matnas Beis Choron represents Rabbi Eliezer's Shita, that holds that with regard to Nedarim, things that in general people would vitor, means overlook, and wouldn't constitute a monetary issue, when it comes to Nedarim, we are more restrictive. And we'll repeat ourselves, so that even though in general, when it comes to Dinei Mominus, like the case above, with the father and the grandfather and the grandson, there might be a Talmud Chacham, that's a monetary concern. So maybe we could say in more general terms, kni almanas lahaknos would work, but when it comes to, we'll say, a subterfuge around a vow, I might want to point out that it's true the case on the top of the Amud also involved a vow. Asrinu l'nichsei said on the second line from the top, but nevertheless, the ultimate beneficiary was the grandson. He was not the subject of the vow, and that's in contrast to the father in the case of the Matnas Beis Choron, where he was the subject of the vow, and hence, in order to circumvent the violation of the vow by the subject of the vow, we will not allow a kni almanas lahaknos. The Gemara raises a question. Tanan, Omru Chachamim, Kol. The word Kol is squiggle underlined. It's an inclusive expression, and it says Kol matana she'eno she'mikdishote mikudeshes eno matana. Any gift that, when given, cannot be sanctified by the receiver of the gift, it's not a gift. So that is a quote from the Mishnah. Kol lasuye mai, the kol expression, this inclusive expression. What is being included? Lav lasuye ha milsa dishomet bekifi. Isn't it coming to include a case like above, where the son who was cut out of the inheritance, the son who was stealing the flax stalks, namely the father of this wayward son, when presented with the possibility that the grandson might be a Talmud Chacham, so he says, okay, let the son get it in order for the grandson, who, when he becomes a Talmud Chacham, will acquire the property. Can the son sanctify it? Well, obviously no. He's not in the position to sanctify the property. Oh, so if he's not in the position to sanctify the property, the gift, the transfer, doesn't work. The Gemara, or we can say Rav Nachman, would respond, Loi. That's not what the Mishnah intends to include as being a non-matana, but rather Lasuye lishna basra deshmaitze de rava. We have a little star drawing your attention to Amud Aleph at the bottom of Amud, 3 lines up from the bottom of Amud Aleph. What the Mishnah intends by saying kol matana shena is coming to include the teaching on the second version of Rava, where Rava said, not only when there's a clear stipulation of the gift, given only so that father can come and partake of it, that is forbidden, but even where the language is not such a, let's say, clear, explicit stipulation, but using the language of the Gemara, where even if the son had said to his friend, Hein lifonecha yovo abo v'yochal, but even that case will be prohibited. And that's what the Mishnah's inclusive expression of kol is coming to include. But as far as kni almanas lahaknos is concerned, Rav Nachman will tell you that is effective, and the Mishnah had no intention of prohibiting a case of kni almanas lahaknos, even in a case of the wayward son featured above. And hence Rav Nachman will maintain that the grandson would be able to acquire the properties, though the father had been cut out of it. With that, we conclude our shiur for today.